Alright, what's up guys? Welcome back again to another video of Corbin's Curiosities. We're going to be trying something a little bit different. Moving forward, I said that I want these videos to seem a lot more professional. So we're going to have proper introductions from here on forward instead of me just kind of babbling around. Another change I'm going to make, that is so wobbly. I really got to get a better stand. But another thing that I want to change and kind of work on is I'm gonna save the answering the questions that I've gotten over the week for the end of the video. That way we have our introduction and get straight on into the program itself. I'm gonna try that out, and I think that might work a little bit better. I have gotten a little bit of feedback on that, which is great. And because the title is Curiosities, I do want to keep the tea theme going on. That's going to stay in there because it's just a fun little thing. So today, to help us with the program, we have a nice, it's called African Hibiscus. It's a really good tea. So if you have the chance to find some yourself, I definitely recommend it. But today's program, yesterday's video, it was mostly just a for fun video. Me and my girlfriend just kind of wanted to fix that real quick. We just kind of wanted to get together, have fun, and do it. Just a funny little video. But I am going to revisit the topic that we did in our for fun little video, which is going to be a DIY effigies and Native American pottery. And the reason we're revisiting both of these topics again is because, honestly, I've been getting more feedback over the Native American pottery and especially the effigies more than any other topic we have covered. The effigies especially have just seemed to generate more interest than anything else I've done so far. So we're going to revisit those a few more times and get more into detail with each video. But today, I've gotten a few messages from different people asking, hey, do you have any kind of pottery stuff that we can do at home without the use of a wheel? And yes, and that's what we're going to be learning today. What you need is pretty simple. Mostly, you just need the clay will stain. Clay does stain. And if you have a table like mine that has really deep wood grains, then if you just play with the clay on your bare table, it's going to get all in that wood grain, and you're not going to be able to get it out. You're going to have to pick it out. So, first thing you need, definitely something to work with the clay. Second thing you need is a little bit of water. I'm doing my dishes right now, so I'll put my water in a martini glass so that'd be easy for me to get to. And second, what you're going to need is either oven bake, or air dry clay. I have air dry clay at the moment. It's just Crayola air dry clay. You can get this at Walmart. I don't like this as much for the purposes of this program, but it's what I have at the moment. And the reason I don't like this as much is because for what we're doing today, it isn't as authentic. So this kind of color is what you're going to find whenever you're working with porcelain, raku, or stoneware clay. Raku is just a very specialized Japanese style clay, or Japanese made clay rather. It's made in Japan, and it's very specialized for its unique absorbency properties. And all of our pottery and clay work program or videos that I've done, I've always talked about clay's absorbency. Clay is super absorbent. When this stuff gets near water, it's almost like a sponge. It will suck water right up, and it absorbs it until the water's completely gone. Raku, however, has a very unique chemical property to where it will not only absorb water, it will actually absorb flame and smoke when you fire it. And actually, let me get you an example real quick. So, these are two examples of raku-fired pottery. And on this one, because I used a white glaze, you can't see it as well. But here on the black, where you see, especially, ooh, that's a really good spot, right here. This black, this darker black going around in a pattern, I did that myself. But where you see this lighter black kind of come off and go into the white, that is from where the raku clay absorbed the flame and the smoke from the kiln. And this little effigy is another example of it. All those little cracks are not because it broke. Those little cracks are actually the trails of the smoke and the flame. So, raku is very special for that, and it's usually in this color. Now, back to my original dislike of this clay, it was authenticity. Because if you look at Native American pottery, and if you look into the kind of clay they were using, it is a dark, dark brown. It's a very, very dark brown. And that's mostly because their clay came right out of the ground. They would mostly dig it up with their own two hands and process it. And their form of processing was really just kind of filtering out all its impurities. And there's a number of ways you can do this, all the way from mushing it out, just kind of smashing it in between your fingers like this, and just doing that over and over like you're kneading dough. That's one way to get rid of those impurities. Another way is to boil it, or to just sit it in water for a while until it turns into mud, take it out, and then dry it. And it comes out into this really dark kind of chocolatey brown. So, for the purposes of this program, since we are going to learn how to do our own at-home Native American pottery using their techniques, I don't like this clay. But there's a few reasons this clay is really good to use. One, it's non-toxic. A lot of our processed clays aren't necessarily toxic, but if you buy it from like Walmart and stuff like that, it is oven baked clay. And oven baked clay has some chemical properties to it to allow it to fire in the oven. Because normal, like earthenware, stoneware, porcelain, has to get into the thousands of degrees. When you get your oven baked clay, like from Walmart, it's got some different chemical properties there. It's factory made to be able to fire at those lower temperatures. And give me one moment because it looks... There we go. Sorry about that, guys. I had to make sure that wasn't an important message because it was from somebody from work. But, as I was saying, oven-baked clay is toxic if you get it from Walmart. So that's why I like this, because it's non-toxic. That's some of the pros. And this is a lot better for kids as well. Because I do it all the time, and I'm a 24-year-old adult. I still will now and then be like, oh, there's something on my finger. Let me just, and then I get a mouthful of clay. Kids do that all the time. So this is a really good clay if you want to do this kind of project with your child. But we're going to hop right into the program, because first thing we're going to go over is different techniques. We're going to be going over two different techniques on making the actual Native American pottery. And then after that, we're going to kind of go over the techniques for effigies. Now, our pottery, for the sake of this video, because I don't want to have too much silence, and I also really don't have that much clay left in here. So we're not going to be making a full-size, like, vase bowl or anything like that, but we're all going to make a pretty decent size. But the first technique we're going to go over is what is called pinch potting. And there is a proper Native American term for that, but I'm horrible at pronouncing words, and I hate mispronouncing other people's languages. So I'm not even going to attempt it at the moment. But pinch potting, or hand molding, is one of, not the main, but it's one of the main forms of Native American pottery. And the techniques are pretty much exactly what it sounds like. A pinch pot is not going to be very big. Whenever we see a lot of Native American pottery, it's a pretty good size. Usually they're about the size of a vase or a pitcher or a jar. They're a decent size. Those are not done with this pinch potting technique. Now, pinch pottery is the kind of technique that they would use for their quick and easy vessels. A lot of times, whenever you're doing pinch pottery, or if you find an actual artifact that's done with the pinch pot method, it's going to be very small. You could fit it in your pocket. And that's pretty much how they would use it. They would keep it in their pouch or just carry it around in whatever they have on them, so that if they come to a body of water and just need something to drink, or if they find some seeds that they want to take back home with them, they can just pull this out of their pouch, put the seeds or that water in it, and use it as a quick cup or a quick thing to carry stuff back home. So it's a very quick and easy method for very streamlined use pottery. Now, one thing I want to say, breaking away from the kind of history lesson we're going through, one thing I want to say with this clay, whether you get oven bake or this air dry clay from a store, you are not going to be able to use this for any kind of food, sadly. This air dry clay, and I'll go ahead and show you an example I made of an effigy. A little humanoid kind of Aztec style effigy right here. It is hard and dry. It is. But it will still flake off when you touch it. So if you put your food in this after it's fully dried, those flakes are going to come off in your food. And while it's non-toxic, still not something you're going to want to ingest. Same thing with the oven baked clay. Now, you won't get as many flakes off in oven baked clay, but you will still eventually wear it out, and it's really not made for food. Now, I'll talk about how the Native Americans and our indigenous people, got around that here in a minute. But just don't put any water or food in your pottery if you're going to end up watching this video and doing this at home for yourself. It is an awesome and really fun art project, though. But, again, we have our plate, we have our water, and we have our clay. So let's go ahead, go through the steps on making our first pinch pot. It's pretty easy. And there's a lot of different methods you can take to starting this. My favorite way to start is from a ball. And the reason for that, when you pull this clay out of the container, it looks like this. And it's not compacted. There's a lot of air bubbles in it and cracks. So what I do is I put just a little bit of water on my hands. Then I take that clay and I just rub it around like this. And what that's doing, it's getting water in all those dry spots, and it's helping seal a lot of those little cracks and holes, which we don't want. Cracks are one thing that you never want in your pottery when you're working with it, because eventually those cracks are going to just keep going and kind of hairline fracture. So you want to be sure you have a lot of water, but not too much. And that's why, if you'll notice, I'm not dipping it in the water. I'm not pouring water on it. I'm taking my finger in the water and I'm just rubbing it around. Now, that's also compacting the clay and getting rid of all those air bubbles. So the next step we want to do is pinch pot, which is literally we're pinching that clay into our desired shape. And what you're going to notice, and this is what I like to call a teachable moment, because I messed up. My clay was too dry. Because as soon as I started working with it, you're already seeing a lot of cracks and a lot of tears. So what we're going to do, get our water, and we're going to rub it around on this one really big tear that you guys saw. And I'm going to do it on another one up to the camera so you can see it. So you see all those cracks right there? I put the water on it, and then all I'm doing is rubbing the clay together. What that water's doing, water's a really good adhesive. And we really don't think about it that much, but water is an excellent adhesive. And since clay is so absorbent, It's soaking up that water, and that water's going into the gaps, into those tears and rips, and it's sealing them. And when we're rubbing the clay like this, it is rubbing it into the water and basically gluing itself back together. So that is an excellent, excellent way to fix any kind of tears you have in these initial stages. And I'm just going to go around the entire thing. Now, I said that you want to be sure you don't use too much water. When you're doing at-home pottery like this, since it's not going to be put in a kiln, it's really hard to use too much water. Basically, if you use too much water, you're going to start playing with mud, essentially. It's going to turn it from clay to literal mud. And you don't want to work with mud. Once it gets too wet, it's impossible to really work with and get how you want. But I'm going to keep going around the edges, making sure I get all those tears. And this is a very important step. This is one step you don't want to skip. If you do skip this step, and you have tears and rips and stuff like that in your pot, what's going to happen once it dries is those splits are going to worsen. They're going to split even more. Because the clay, as it dries, and this is a good note, whenever you're doing clay, even at home clay, by the way, even if you're doing this at home, always make your pottery a little bit bigger than the intended purpose. And the reason for that is when clay dries, it actually shrinks. It will shrink in on itself. So while it's shrinking, if all those tears are there, it's going to split. But I'm going to keep going around. And again, this is not a pretty piece at all. And again, it doesn't have to be. It just has to be able to fit in our pocket and be able to hold water. We're essentially making the Native American version of a shot glass. This is a very quick drinking vessel. Because honestly, they didn't really see cups and bowls. They would just see things that could hold objects. They just saw cylinders and containers. They didn't really have any specific use for it. They would drink out of a bowl if they had to. And for the most part, they would. But their drinking utensils, most of them, not all of them, but most of them, looked a lot like what we're making today. Now, one note I do want to make while I'm working on this and finishing up, because I really did let it get too dry before I started working. So I apologize for that. But one note I really do want to make, and this is even whenever I'm teaching pottery, whenever I'm teaching my class, I always be sure to say one thing, and that is, if you have a lack of symmetry, if your pot is not perfectly symmetrical, that's fine. If you have imperfections, that's fine. If it's a little crooked, that is perfectly fine. And especially when you're doing Native American style, because when you're doing this with your bare hands, it is incredibly hard, near impossible, to do this and with your bare hands and get it perfectly straight and symmetrical. It's not impossible. It's very hard, especially with this method, because we're pinching the clay. We're just pinching it. We're not molding it anyway. We're pinch potting it. And when you're doing that, you're not going to get it even all the time. But that adds authenticity, because theirs were not perfectly symmetrical and theirs were not perfectly even. So, especially if you're doing this with kids, be sure you let those kids know that if theirs is crooked, theirs is a little lopsided, that's fine. That makes it a lot more authentic, which I think is a lot better than trying to make it perfect and pretty, because any real artifact you're going to find is not going to be perfect, pretty, or completely symmetrical. So, here we have a pretty good pinch pot drinking vessel. Now, I did say that you're not going to be able to drink out of this, and that's true. They would, and the reason is, one, they're using clay right out of the earth, which one of these days I'm going to whenever I can find a good spot, I really want to do a live video on how to harvest your own clay. It's pretty easy to do. I really want to do a live video on harvesting your own clay and filtering it, processing it. But clay right out of the earth is not man-made, obviously. That camera's all over the place, so I'm not even going to touch my table. But it's right out of the earth. So it has no chemicals in it. Now, that helps it for the most part. I'm not going to get into all the chemistry of it because I'm horrible at chemistry. But the basic premise is clay out of the earth dries a lot better. And once it dries, it's almost stone. It's a lot less absorbent. It loses some of that absorbency. Not all, but some. And they knew this. So they would put water in this, drink it, and after so many uses, it would just wear out. Or it would crack. And that was fine, because this took us, 5-10 minutes. And that's pretty much their view. This was not anything important. This was just a little pocket-sized piece that they would use on the spur of the moment. Once it wore out and cracked, they would toss it. It was not very valuable. So, that's just a quick little lesson on pinch potting. Now, what's really cool is, even though these were not very celebrated pieces among the indigenous tribes, they still would get a little bit artistic with it. They had a lot of different symbols. And the symbols meant a lot of different things depending on, one, which tribe you were, and two, pretty much who you were as a person and your intended use. If you were drinking water out of this, which is our intended purpose, they would put some sort of guardian spirit of the water on it. Or they would give some sort of symbol of water. And that is mostly just the religious and sentimental aspects coming into play. Remember when I said our Native American people, turtle was a very popular one. I don't really have anything to carve mine with. You can do this with pretty much anything. Well, we'll just use my fingernail. Now again, remember, if you've ever seen Native American cave drawings, they're not, again, symmetrical. They're not perfect. They pretty much just drew and carved whatever they saw. And pretty much a lot of their drawings and their designs was nothing but lines and circles. So here we have a very hastily made kind of turtle shape. Another very popular symbol that you would find, and this is on all pottery, not just your little pinch pottery, but another one would be a spiral. And the spiral means a lot of things in a lot of different tribes. It's the sun, it's the passage of time. It has a lot of different meanings. But pretty much all of them have to do with time. Time is a really big thing with your Native American cultures, or just your indigenous people. So, our pinch pot is done. You can decorate this a lot more, by the way. One of the other good things about this clay that I'll mention real quick is because this clay, even after it dries, is so absorbent, you can paint it. And what's really cool, this stuff will actually soak up that paint. It will absorb that paint and stain it both a little bit on the outside and some on the inside in the grain of the clay. And the reason that's really good and the reason that's so cool is it will keep it from flaking and eventually just falling off your paint. It'll absorb your paint. And that's really, really good, especially if you want it to stay. You can look up different Native American designs and kind of come up with your own if you do this at home. If you do this at home, honestly, please send me a picture. I really love seeing, I love getting messages about these videos for one. And I also just really like seeing, whenever I teach classes, I'll get emails now and then from people, from old students, and they'll show me, if they've continued this craft, kind of what they made. So it's just really cool to watch. So, I don't see any questions so far. So we're going to go ahead and go on to our next part. And this method I'm about to show you guys is one of the more important methods. And the reason for that is this method would allow you to make much, much bigger pottery. and this is called the coil method. Now, the coil method isn't the only method they would use. A lot of times, what they would do is just take a stone, like a big circular rock, and they would mold the clay around it and then pull the rock out, and boom, you just molded yourself a cup or a jar. But if they didn't have anything like that around, they would use the coil method. And the coil method, again, just like with our pinch pot, the first step is compacting that clay, making sure it's not too dry. So we just get a little bit of water. I'm going to use more than I did for that first time. And then we just go to work. Now, the coil method, you're basically coiling the clay around itself. So the first thing we need to do, or the second thing we need to do, after we compact our clay, is we got to work it. Now, a lot of times they would do this with just their hands, but other times, according to some of the lessons, because I've spoken to a bunch of different Native American people during ArchaeoFest over at Pinson Mounds. That's where I meet a lot of people, Native Americans that I'm still friends with. And one of them is a potter. And I'm not going to say her name or anything on here, just in case, because she probably doesn't want to be advertised. But she taught me that some of the things that her people would have done when they're using the coil method is they would take logs or long, again, circular stones or logs and use them as rolling pins. And yes, that would leave impressions, but they would keep the impressions of the wood or the stone because it adds character. And they like that. They were a very artistic people. You can roll this out with your hands like I'm doing or use a rolling pin. I'm using my hands because I don't have a rolling pin. And also just want to I like doing things how they were done. I like kind of keeping with it. So we're going to keep some water on it. The only problem with doing this with your hands, one, you do risk ripping the clay. Because as you roll it like this, it's going to expand and you're going to end up putting more weight and stress on it. And that can risk to tearing. If it does tear, if it tears on me, I will show you guys how to repair it. Because I don't mind tearing too much. If it does tear, that's fine. I'll use that as a teachable moment. But again, doing it with just your hands does take a lot longer than if you have a rolling pin or if you want to keep with how they did it, a stone or a nice log or stick. Now, essentially what we're doing is we're making a nice long rope with our clay to do our coil method. And the reason this was a more popular method is because it allows the use and the creation of much, much bigger pieces, much bigger pottery. And I'm about to show you guys why that is. Because with our pinch pot method, we didn't have that much clay to work with. And you really can't pinch pot an entire vase. But with the coil method, after we have our rope, just like this, what we're going to do is first get our desired shape. For this, I'm just going to go circle. And all we're doing, sorry for the camera shake. I'm going to figure out why that is. I got an actual stand, and it's apparently not working out very well. But let me fix a few tears. Just like with our pinch pot, after we kind of get it coiled around itself, you can see, again, I didn't use enough water. I'm not used to this clay, which is fine. So what we're going to do, we're just going to go around it. And this is something you guys, when you do this yourself at home, be sure you follow this step. This is a very important one. All I'm doing, again, taking that water, finding the tears, and just filling them in. Now, be sure that when we get to this point, and when you guys, if you do this yourself, when you get to this point, be sure that you have enough water, because water is about to become very important. Now, I know it doesn't look very pretty right now. It just kind of looks like a snake. It's a coil. At this step, we can do one of two different methods to get this into our desired piece of pottery. We can do their method, which is we would take our hands like this and just rub it up and down to smooth it out. I'm not going to do that. If I did that, the camera would bounce all over the place. So what I'm going to do is another method. And all that is pinching the walls of our coil. And of course, use water. Be sure you fill in any gaps as you go. And continue pinch. Continue pinching, not continue pinch. Now, what's really cool about this method is it doesn't have to stop here. With this method, you can stack multiple coils on top of each other. You don't have to just coil around once. A lot of their pottery would have or be made with the use of multiple coils, because it's a lot easier to work with clay this way if you don't kind of overwhelm yourself. You start just a little bit, and then after you're finished with this, you make another coil, and you coil it on top of this. Now, mine's probably not going to look that pretty because I've not done this method in a long, long time. So this was a nice, making this video is going to be a nice learning lesson for me is what learning lesson. A nice time to kind of re-practice. But we got a decent start going on. Now, one of the cons of using this method compared to the just hand molding method or molding it with a rock is it's a lot easier to get tears, and you got to constantly kind of reevaluate, reposition. This camera stand is annoying me so bad because I look up and all I see is this, and I know that's horrible for you guys. So I do apologize because I'm trying to keep these videos as quality as possible. But from here, we have a nice, decent sized bowl. I think I want to make this into a bowl. Yeah, it's going to be a bowl. But again, you're just going around. You continuously reevaluate yourself. You find any gaps or tears, and you be sure that you smooth them out. Now, if you'll notice, if you look at any Native American pottery artifact, you're going to notice that you don't see any signs of coiling on it. And the reason for that is because, like I'm doing now, the coils would mostly get rubbed out. Because if you get rid of the coils, if you leave them, first I'll say if you leave them, it does add a very nice aesthetic. However, it takes away a lot of the integrity. It leaves a lot more gaps in your finished product. But if you did take, let's say, a pottery shard and you look down at the center of it, you would see evidence of the coil method because you can't fill the gaps up on the inside. You can only fill them in on the outside. And I know this doesn't look like much now, but that's fine. We can make them look pretty as we go. I think my bowl's slowly starting to turn into a jar. That's fine. That's one of the really fun things with clay, is if you don't like how your original idea looks, because clay is so malleable, excuse me, and easy to work with, you can easily take what you thought you were making, turn it into something else. Now, at this step, after you make the walls and the top, you of course got to make the base. A lot of times, people will make the base first. It can be easier. I like making the walls first because if I make the base first and then the walls, I might find that I miscalculated. And now my walls are too thick and too wide for the base after I smooth it all out. So I like doing my walls first and then making my base. And to make the base, all you do, it's kind of like with our pinch pot. You pinch it together, flatten it out, and then, oof, that camera. I'll just do it like this. And then all you're doing is connecting everything. Now, one thing I will say is real clay is a lot easier to work with than this. And the reason for it, this is sculpting clay. This is pretty much strictly sculpting clay. It will work, and it will still look good. You'll just have to work with it a little bit more, and you're going to have to continuously kind of clean up as you go, because this clay will pick up absolutely everything. If you have any dust on your fingers, hair, fuzz, it will pick it up. It's a oddly staticky kind of clay. But I'm not going to make this look too pretty, because, again, I just like the authenticity. Now, one thing I want to say, because I'm noticing I'm saying it being not pretty and not symmetrical adds authenticity. Native American pottery is absolutely beautiful. The artifacts we find are absolutely beautiful. They're stunning. But, there's a but, some of the more used, let's say that I want to use this bowl. See, it went from a jar to a bowl. It went from a bowl to a jar to a bowl again. But let's just say I want to use this every day to gather water, gather corn, whatever I want to gather. This is going to be used every day. I will spend some time making it good so that it will work. But since I know using it every day like that is going to wear it out a lot quicker, I'm not going to spend as much time and make it as decorated and as pretty. Now, if this was one that I was gifting to somebody, or if this was one that I was going to use to celebrate or tell a story with, then it would have a lot more time spent on it. And that story would be added to the pottery itself. A lot of Native American pottery, because they were such an artistic people, and because they always were telling their story and their history went into everything they made. So a lot of times, pottery, and this is the theme of today's video, that Native American pottery, indigenous people's pottery, literally is both an amazing historic artifact, and it also tells the story of the person that made it or what they were going through. You just have to know what to look for. And you just have to know if there's symbols or writing on it, what those mean, those pictographs. So, maybe in another video, when I'm doing strictly just like cups, bowls, or jars making, I will make a much prettier one. But I wanted this one to kind of look like what you would find if you went out, dug in your backyard, and found a Native American pottery artifact. It would most likely look like this. Now, we went from our pinch potting and then our coil potting. This bowl used to be a rope of clay, and now, once it dries, is a usable bowl. I'm going to take this time not only to kind of open it up for questions, since I do see a few people here, but I also want to explain something about drying your pieces at home. Modern day pottery, if you're doing this in an actual studio, drying is a lot easier because the studio's never really kept cold. If it's kept cold, that's going to affect your clay and your glazes. You want this to stay nice and warm. So be sure that you put these in a warm area. Put that back on my plate. In a warm area. And also, if you find that it's starting to sag a little bit, maybe you use too much water, maybe it's too heavy on the top, that's really easy to fix. Literally, just either prop it against something or put something around it. I've seen some people put foil around theirs and then seal the foil at the top so that it won't sag. I don't like using foil. And the only reason I don't like using foil is because if you did leave some water in there, that water is going to, once it dries, start to be forced out. and that's going to grab the foil, and you might end up, when you unwrap it, get foil stuck in your finished piece. But here we have two replicated pieces of Native American pottery with two of their main methods: the pinch pot method and our coil pot method. Since I don't see any questions in the chat, we're going to go on to the last part of today's video. And I just wanted to touch up on effigy making. And this is going to be a topic that we revisit, because there's a lot of different ways to make effigies. But there's also a lot of different kinds of effigies. Here's one I made, and I made this to kind of mimic your Mayan or Aztec style. The little growth on the back of the head of this figure would be their headdresses, because if you look at their cultures, they have very, very extravagant headdresses. Headdresses were a big thing for them. So a lot of their effigies and a lot of their figures that you'll find are usually humanoid and usually have some kind of decoration like that. And this one's just sitting cross-legged. He has his hands up. He's probably either praying or singing. And he has his little headdress. So this is an example of an effigy you can make. Another example of effigies. We've mostly looked at animals so far, and this one is an animal. But this is a different kind of effigy that I've not talked about in videos yet. And yes, it is an owl. But if you'll notice, its neck is long and cylindrical. A lot of Native American pottery, again, would be some kind of container. And a lot of times what we're going to find are vases or jars. Now, obviously, depending on where you're at, you might have a big deal with bugs. They might get in your food. And if you just leave the top of your jar or vase open, let's say you got corn or rice in there, bugs are going to get in. So they would make little stoppers, kind of like this one. And this one is in the form of an animal. It's not necessarily an effigy, but it could be considered one just because of the technique and its look, its design, and what went into making it. So here's another example of one we can make. The final example, so far all of them that I've really shown you guys have been turtles and the Inuit type effigies. Here's another example of one. And this is just a very plain owl, and the only extra pieces that were added were the eyes and the beak. A lot of times whenever we find effigies, some of them would just be straight clumps like this with the details carved in. I just added the eyes and the beak myself just because I thought it'd be a little cuter. But if I wanted to be authentic, I would have carved in the eyes and the beak to make this an authentic looking replica of another example of an effigy. But making them your own is pretty simple. And this is one that I strongly recommend doing with kids because, one, you're making animals. And that's always a lot of fun, especially for kids. Kids love animals. But you can include a very important lesson while they're making these animals. You can explain to them why animals were so valued. Yeah, so that's an excellent point, Zach, and I don't think I talked about that in my last video. The owl is one of the most fascinating animals in indigenous people culture, especially Native Americans, because some tribes saw the owl as an evil omen. The owl was a messenger of basically Satan. It came from hell. If you looked into its eyes, you were basically giving away your soul to be carried away. In other cultures, the owl was celebrated. It was a very wise and watchful protector, and also a very knowledgeable animal. It's a very wise animal, and it would be celebrated and used to try to channel that wisdom. And in other tribes even, for example, the story of fire. The owl would have been one of the animals that helped. It didn't successfully bring fire, but it was involved. So the owl has a lot of different meanings in our indigenous cultures, which is fascinating. That could be a topic for another video, because the effigies and the animal spiritualism, because I've been getting so much feedback on them, that's going to be a topic probably that's going to go for another video, possibly two, I don't know yet, but most definitely another video for sure. But whenever I would do this program, I liked to have the kids, or any other people, adults too, but especially the kids, I like to have them make turtles. Because turtles, they don't take as much time in detail. And they don't take as much time in detail, but also they're a lot more simplistic. They're an easily identifiable animal for children. And they also have a really nice story. Again, this also depends on what tribe. But turtle would be an animal that had a multitude of uses. If you, again, remember we talked about this in another video. If you came and you needed water, then you would carve out probably a turtle effigy, or make one, place it in the water to kind of channel that spirit, to keep the water plentiful, pure, all that kind of stuff. It was also, in some tribes, viewed as a protector. It was really cool. And remember, a lot of my videos, I always talk about things that are global, that carried over to a lot of different cultures. Japan, some Hawaiian tribes, and I can't remember the name of the other culture and the other tribe, but a lot of them viewed turtle as the actual world. The world was thought to be carried on the back of a turtle. And whenever islands randomly popped up, or were newly discovered that they hadn't seen before, would be because that island was riding on the back of a turtle. Turtle is also seen as protector. That shell, if you had a turtle talisman or a turtle effigy with you, you would be protected. Now, I'm not very superstitious myself, but I almost always wear the turtle effigy that I got. It was handmade, and it is authentic. It's not an artifact. It is an authentic replica, though. And even though I'm not superstitious, I still like wearing it because of the sentimentality behind it, and because it is a symbol of protection. So, turtle would be something that kids would very often be given, or be, kind of around, or that kind of talisman to protect them. But we're going to go on with kind of making our turtle. Turtle effigies always only have, I have to count real quick, 7 parts. The body, 4 legs, the head, and the tail. And that's all the time. You can add eyes and stuff if you want to. But again, like when we talked about our owl, eyes were usually carved in, all those little intricate details. On my effigies, my replicas that I made, I did add eyes just because it was cute. But we're going to go ahead and get started. So first, I didn't talk about and walk you through the step because it's the step that we did on our first 2 pieces. But you pat out your clay, compact it, and we're going to go ahead and make our body. Once you get finished with this step, the first step that we did on both of our pieces, you pretty much already have the body. And then you can just flatten out the underside. Now, first thing I'm going to add is the tail. Now, whenever we're putting separate pieces on clay like this, remember, water is our glue. So what you're going to do is you're going to put a little water on the spot that you want to add our tail, and then just smush it on there. And that water perfectly binds. And then, after it binds on there, we can shape our tail up. I think for this one, his tail's going to be up a little bit because he's happy. Now, second thing I like to add is the head. And again, water's our adhesive. Put water where our head's going to go. have our head right here already molded out, and then just smush on there. Now, after you smush it on there, even though water is our adhesive, you still kind of want to work with it, push it down, squeeze it a little bit. All you're doing is compacting the clay, making sure it's all stuck together. Just like that right there. And now we add our legs. Now, again, remember what I said on our two pieces, especially if you're doing this with kids. This is, again, something I really like to press. If it's uneven, if it's not symmetrical, don't get upset. Especially with the legs. Legs are really hard to get symmetrical in pieces like this, but it adds authenticity, I promise. If you look up actual artifact effigies, they're not always going to be perfectly symmetrical and even. So again, it adds a little bit of authenticity in my opinion. But while you're doing this with kids, or if you're just doing this with friends, you can tell them the story of Turtle. How Turtle is seen as protector. It has a very variety of beliefs and uses. The protector, you channel the spirit for purified water. And we got our last little leg on there. So there we go. And from here, I said that we can carve on the details. You can carve on symbols. Like, remember the swirl. We talked about that swirl pattern being a very universalized symbol in our indigenous tribes. And depending on what tribe you're researching or what tribe you are in, this swirl could mean something completely different. Then we're going to add some eyes. And you don't have to do this with your finger. In my research, I found, and talking to the woman I told you guys about, my friend, the Native American potter, she has told me that a lot of the carvings that they would do would be from like deer antlers and bone and stuff like that. But there we have it. We have our little effigy. And with this effigy, I would, if I were in this tribe, I would put this in water once it dries, or I would put it in my child, my friend, my family members, pretty much sleeping area to kind of watch over and protect them. Now, if you remember again, we talked about how this kind of pottery and just pottery in general, Native American pottery, yes, they would leave it in water, but water, again, will break this stuff down. After a while, water is going to completely ruin this effigy. So they would make a lot of them. Not all at once, but after they would come back and check on it. They would not just put this in the water and never worry about it again. They would continuously come and check on it to be sure it's still perfect, to be able to continuously channel the spirit of that animal into the water. And if the water finally started to break it down, they would make another one because it really did not take us that long to make it. So, we learned 3 different methods on making 3 different pieces of historical indigenous tribes, indigenous peoples, pottery. If y'all have any questions, because that's all we had for today, if y'all have any questions, go ahead and ask them. While I'm waiting for you guys to ask questions, I'm going to go ahead and answer some of the questions that I've had over the week. Because I'm going to start trying to do the Q&A section at the end of the video. That way, when you tune in or watch this, when it's not live, you're launching right into the program. So I'm going to try that format. But first question that I'm going to read. This one came from YouTube. This was an email. And basically, they're asking if I will ever do a live pottery video on the wheel. I would absolutely love to. I really, really want to do a live on the wheel, like from start to finish pottery video for you guys. Here's the issue though. Both studios that I have had access to are on lockdown. One of them was on campus, and that one is currently on lockdown. The other one was a very close friend's personal pottery studio. But he does not originally live here. He rents out this studio. And he had to move back home during this lockdown because he lived on campus. He was in the dorms. So both of the studios that I've had access to are currently unavailable. But if that ever changes, and certainly I'm going to keep doing these videos, then yes, once I have access to a studio, I will do a live video from start to finish in an actual studio on the wheel for you guys. I just can't right now. I don't have access to any of that equipment. I wish. But, sorry about that. The second question I had was, if I continue doing these kind of effigy lessons, will I start breaking it down into tribes? Yes. If I continue doing these effigy videos, I plan to do one more for sure. If people still have questions on them, then I'm going to do a series of effigy videos, probably not back to back, but a series of them about different types of tribes and how they would use effigies in kind of that spiritualism practice. So yes, if this next video on the effigies still doesn't answer the questions people have, I'll break it up. So yeah, I just don't want to do a whole bunch of videos on nothing but that because there's so much more I could talk about. Next question. Am I ever going to do an entire video solo about Egypt? And yes. Once I'm doing a lot more research because what I know about Egypt, I know enough. Oop, I hit the table, sorry. I know enough about Egypt mythology, Egyptian history to kind of talk about it. Yes. But these videos aren't just a talk. These videos are an actual program. These are actual lessons. So I'm doing a little bit more research so that I can for sure do a proper, really good actual lesson. So yes, a video all about Egypt is coming up soon. I just have to figure out what on Egypt I kind of want to talk about. I'm probably going to do a few videos on Egypt. One I really want to talk about is mummification. From the process to the belief. I really kind of want to do a video on mummification. I don't know. There's going to be some Egyptian videos. I just have to do some research, figure out what about Egypt I want to talk to. 2 more questions that I got this week. The next one is, again, from YouTube. And this one was asking, am I ever going to do live animal videos? And secondly, would I ever repeat any of my old topics once I get a really comfortable format and start being more professional? Yes. Once I get a proper setup, once I'm doing this like quote-unquote professionally, we are going to revisit past topics. I just don't want to revisit them so soon because then I would just be putting out another video talking about something that we talked about like last week. I am going to revisit old topics though, just not anytime soon. Last question. This one came from Facebook. And the reason I'm not kind of saying these names is because none of these questions came from people that I personally know. So I don't want to just kind of throw their name out there in a video. But this last question, I did my tea program, and they're wanting to know if I'm ever going to do another tea program. Maybe. I honestly don't know. The tea program that I did wasn't strictly a tea program. It was talking about historical uses and how they're basically making teas but calling them like potions or tonics. That's what my last video was about. It wasn't just about, making tea and drinking it. It was about medicinal uses. So I honestly don't know. I'd have to see if there's any other topics with tea that I could relate to scientific or historical. Because I doubt you guys want to tune in here and listen to me talk for 40 minutes about making and drinking tea. But that's all the questions I had from this week. Zach wants to know, have I seen the picture of snapping turtles with giant mounds of earth on them? A possibility for the turtle earth myth or legend. Yes, I have seen that. And a lot of that is because turtles, snapping turtles too, they're going to sit at the bottom. Yeah, they will swim around, but a lot of times they're kind of like, they want to kind of sit at the bottom. And not all the time, but sometimes, because they are usually at the bottom of that water, they're below what's called the thermocline. And the thermocline is basically heat rises. So the thermocline is a literal separation of the hot water and the cold water. It's not a visible line. But if you go diving, once you enter that hot water at the top, you're going to be going down and down. Suddenly that water is very, very cold. It's an incredibly drastic change, and it comes out of nowhere. That's your thermocline. When turtles are down at that level, because they will stay underwater sometimes, especially snapping turtles, they're going to cover themselves in dirt. And that's really to warm themselves up. Same thing for if they're at the surface. They're probably warming themselves up a little bit. Or if it's moist, cooling themselves down. It works both ways. And yeah, that does go with the legend of the turtle carrying islands or mountains on their back. That's a huge legend. And honestly, I might do a video talking about that, because we see that in a bunch of different cultures. We see that in, it's either Aztec or Mayan. I can't remember which one. We see that in one of those. We see that in some Native American cultures. And we see that in China and Japan. That's one of those kind of legends and beliefs that are among a bunch of different cultures. Again, that I've probably never met. I don't think there's ever been an instance where an ancient Japanese individual has met an ancient Native American individual. I don't think that has ever really happened. It might have, but I don't think it has. At least not in the time frame that it would have had to happen for these legends to just pop up globally among different cultures like that. So I think I'm going to do a whole video just on that. But did anybody else have any questions? Ooh, excuse me. I had a cough while I was drinking. All right. Well, if nobody else had any questions, thank y'all for coming and watching this video today. And thank y'all for watching this if you're watching it at a different time. If you decide to do this at home and you have absolutely any questions, again, this is an excellent and really fun activity for kids or people like me that just like getting dirty. But if you have any questions about this at home pottery or different types of pottery you can do in your home, do not hesitate to send me a message, because pottery is one of my biggest hobbies, one of my biggest passions. I don't mind helping at all. India. Yeah, India also has the earth turtle. So the world turtle is probably going to be my next video. I kind of want to really talk about that now. Thank you, Zach. But again, thank you guys. If you have any questions about doing pottery at home, anything that we talked about today, do not hesitate to message me. I do not mind at all helping you guys with your at-home DIY pottery. And you don't even have to just do Native American. If you have questions about doing, normal, not really normal, but modern style pottery or different culture pottery, please shoot me a message. Thank you guys, and I will put a post on Facebook when it's time for the next video. It's probably going to be just a few days since we are getting into finals week. So, might be a day or two. But thank y'all, and I'll see y'all on the next one.